Good morning and welcome to Wisdom on Wednesday. I'm here with Ellen Shukneck, and if you've tuned in before, you know that we have started a series about types of parents. So we did the anxious parent, and today we are going to be talking about the perfectionist parent. At our school, the kind of model it is, it lends itself to
yes.
perfectionist parents.
Yes.
You're spending more time with your kids. You have more of a hand in their projects, their assignments, their tests. You're a co-teacher, you're a partner parent. So it kind of does lend itself to that perfectionist parents flock to these types of schools when they're available. And so today we're going to talk about what that means, what it means to be a perfectionist parent. That it's not necessarily a bad thing. You're going to talk about that there are some good things about it. And how to, though, overcome the negative parts of that, or the seemingly negative parts of that, and also how to not, if that's your tendency, how to not necessarily pass that on to your kids, and how to model something different for them. And so I'm going to turn this over to you, if you'll open us up in this, and thank you.
Yes, and Ashley and I have been laughing because we see these tendencies in ourselves as we look back at how we have been parents, and it's kind of fun because I think it is really something that we fall prey to in this model. But it's a good question to ask, is that, are you happy only when you do something perfectly or when your kids do something perfectly? Because if you are, striving for perfection is really a recipe for failure, because it simply isn't going to be that perfection is achievable. It just isn't. So let's get past that first. So a perfectionist, let's kind of look at what a perfectionist is. It's a person with the disposition to regard anything that isn't perfect as unacceptable. And a perfectionist knows that they can't be perfect in everything, so they tend to choose an area. And in our school, we're going to focus a lot today on thinking we have to have kids who do perfectly in school with perfect grades and perfect projects, because in this model of education, when the mom or dad are so closely involved, the kids' work reflects on the parent.
Yes.
And there's a tendency then to see our self-identity in the performance of our children. And when they're doing poorly, our worth drops. When they're doing great, we feel better in our role. And unfortunately, this type of thinking taken too far can be really self-defeating, because it's a focus on failure, and it often serves to undermine performance in the end, which is kind of interesting, isn't it?
That is.
It's interesting, Ashley, that I've seen such a growth in the number of kids and parents who fall prey to this, and I kind of think it has to do with our culture.
Yes.
We have a culture that extols perfect hair, perfect face, perfect body, perfect diet, perfect getting your kids into the best school, kids looking at pro athletes. So we're all looking at this perfectionism because it's what we see in media, and I think it feeds into it, and we need to be aware of it. And I don't know about you, but maybe you keep an immaculate home, or you decorate your house, like a Hallmark home for Christmas. I don't.
That's my dream.
Or maybe how you dress is super important, or whatever. Think about any area, but today we're really going to focus on the role of you as a co-teacher in this model, and how we can hold our kids to high standards but not perfect standards, and to be okay with that we can be a healthy perfectionist. Right?
And this flows from grammar school. Ellen meets with so many parents, and you see this, I'm sure, from grammar school parents, the co-teachers, and then, this carries on even in which team your kids make, which school are they getting into for college, so it kind of is one of those things that it's not just when you're so closely involved in the grammar school years. This can kind of feed in for many years.
It can, and in a small, close-knit community, it's easy to want to compare our kids and ourselves with other families, and then to kind of get envious and feel like we don't quite measure up because maybe our kids didn't make the highest basketball team, or another child has better grades, and that we can get so caught up in performance and start to compare ourselves that all the joy is taken out. And that's really being more maladaptive. And what we really want to get to the point is where we're able to hold our kids to high standards for themselves and to grow our kids for who they are. The maladaptive perfectionist has this view that I'm never good enough, that I'll never amount to anything, and anytime their child fails or anytime their child makes a mistake or bombs a test, they worry that their child isn't good enough either. And this inner kind of critical voice kind of holds them captive with fear. It's this draining negative emotion that's going on in this fear-driven way of looking at our kids and ourselves. And it also takes away the ability to take joy when things go well, because it's like, okay, well, they did well on this test, but now we got to move on to the next one right away. There's no joy. Because there is
always something, yes.
There's always something, right? There's not a normal disappointment over failures. It's like devastating.
Yes.
Not healthy, okay?
Yeah, and sometimes then, even if your children aren't necessarily, they're hearing this dialogue so much that then this is what you're feeding to them all the time. This is what they're hearing.
So how do we, Ashley, at home, address our kids in a way that we're not growing perfectionism, but we're growing excellence, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And have you thought about that?
Well, that's what, I mean, we started talking about that a little bit earlier of how do you set that standard? What is that standard to make kids proud of what they're doing, but make them realize that it doesn't have to be perfect?
Right.
And one thing that we talked about was setting a standard and focusing on improvement instead of focusing on perfection.
Right. For example, you might have a child who has really messy handwriting. Some of my grandkids do, particularly some of the boys. And so I set a standard and work on growing that standard higher and higher, because they're just not going to be like some of my really neat granddaughters who can write every letter perfectly. So with handwriting, I look for improvement. I look for readability. If I can't read it, then they have to redo it. But I let them know what the standard is and that I'm looking for them to work hard to get better. And really, it's a focus on the process. It's a focus on growing. It's not a focus on the outcome.
Right.
And one of the ways that we grow kids who kind of fall into a maladaptive perfectionistic idea is if we're constantly focusing only on the grades and the outcomes and what that is, because the focus really needs to be on their work effort, on their improving, on their diligence, on the skills of learning that's going to lead them up to eventually getting the grades you want them to grade. Right?
And that's, that can be look at how much you improved over this last test, or look how much your handwriting improved, or look how much your public speaking skills improved. Watch this video versus that, so it can be focusing on those.
And a good place to apply that is rapid recall. Yeah. One of my grandchildren told me right before Thanksgiving that she did not want to do rapid recall because it was too scary. And so we counted how many she had gotten right the day before. And I said, how about if you try to get one more?
That's right.
I said it kind of low because I knew she was scared, and that was okay.
Yeah.
And then she actually did a lot better. And I think sometimes I think about one of my granddaughters who swims, and she used to go into swim meets with these unrealistically high goals. She was going to make the very top teams, and she was going to get these high time standards, and invariably she wouldn't. And what her parents learned was to set the standard as improvement, do better than the next time. And that's really led to greater improvement, because the pressure to be at the top or reach the highest standard is off.
It's
getting better.
Yes. Right? And I also think, and this is probably, I might be jumping a little bit ahead, but I also think allowing that failure.
Exactly.
Ellen and I just talked about that one of your kids and we both share that one of the greatest moments of our life was when we failed at something that we had for so long held as a certain standard. And I think allowing, if for some reason at that swim meet your child or your grandchild didn't improve over the last score, letting them realize
Exactly.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Like life, it's not, there's not going to be a huge, it's okay.
Right.
And so allowing those moments to happen without allowing that disappointment to overtake the whole thing and miss the lesson is
exactly.
important.
And so as a mom or a dad who's a tendency toward perfectionism, you have to kind of weigh how these moments are affecting you. If your child's failure to meet a goal or a grade or something tanks you, it's a good indicator that that you need to work on your own root cause of what is causing your own identity to go down, because mistakes and failures need to be seen as learning opportunities for your child and for you.
Yes.
That we need to.
Oftentimes we are the root cause of our child's perfectionism, let's be honest. So.
And it's so important that we not pass along these tendencies, because in the end, we want our kids to succeed and do the best they can do, but we may be undermining that by putting the pressure on in the wrong way. So we want to make sure that they're seeing the growth and improvement and doing the best they can. I love the statement, good enough is almost always good enough. Okay, that is a really good phrase. Good enough is almost always good enough.
Everybody should put that in their school at home rooms.
And it's true, truthfully. There's a lot of room for growth. And if you're a parent who is constantly on your child about their grades, or constantly on the room about them with their messy rooms, like we all tend to be, also blend in words of kindness, blend in words of encouragement. So you're kind of changing the atmosphere of your home by also adding those encouraging words. If you've been a perfectionist for lots of years, it's going to take time to change your thinking and habits. Be prayerful about it. Ask the Lord to reveal the root causes of this. If there's a maladaptive perfectionism in you, what are the root causes of that? Give up your own right to be right. Admit your mistakes and model a teachable spirit. I would say, as hard as it is, but stop thinking about what other kids are thinking about you and your kids. It just isn't important. So I just want to close with a couple scriptures. One of them is the one in Galatians 1:10 that says, am I trying to win the approval of a man or God, or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. And many times perfectionism is rooted in a desire to please, to reach a standard that we think validates our identity in the eyes of other people. It's seeking affirmation. And really, when we work hard and we strive and we do, we really put in good effort, that should be enough validation. Just the fact that we have done what we can to reach a good standard. That should be enough in and of itself without needing the affirmation of other people. And I love the fact that Romans 5:8 says that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He didn't die for us once we were perfect. He died for us while we were imperfect. Some people have brought up Matthew 5:48, where it says, you therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. But we have to understand what that word in Greek means. It means to be complete, to be brought to wholeness or maturity. And it refers to human integrity and virtue, and about becoming whole and complete in Christ. And that should be our focus over becoming perfect in and of ourselves in our own efforts. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you for, of course, always pointing us to Christ and reminding us, especially when the temptation is there, not to focus on perfection, but focusing on Christ and pointing our children to Christ. Thank you.
Thank you.